here in person. The first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the October 14th and November 2nd, 2021 meetings. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion by Herbst. Do I have a second by Jean?
I have a comment.
All right, we have two comments, one from Mr. Force.
In the November minutes, we refer to Valerie, just Valerie, in one of the references. And if someone outside of this group is reading those minutes, I think they probably don't know who that is. So I would recommend that we use last names throughout.
Sure, I think we
Thank
can
you.
do a house cleaning on that, no problem. Did you have another comment?
No?
Nope, okay, Mr. Robinson.
Also, item 7, we use PIM. We use acronyms a little bit too often.
Right.
In both our memos to the utility members and to the public. Nobody knows that the PIM means Public Information Meeting. Please spell those out if we could. And we use like FM in the memo today, which is force main, but you have to think about it. So if we could stop using acronyms and abbreviations for us that don't deal with it on a daily basis, that would be helpful.
I think the
And the
request
public.
for plain English is great, thank you. I noted. Nodded all around. Okay. Any other comments or concerns? Okay. All of those in favor of approving the minutes for October 14th and November 2nd meetings can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next we are on the director's report. I will flip it over to Director Lindman.
Yeah, we have a few items on here, but there's a couple that I'd like to highlight that are in bold. One, just to recognize Dave Erickson with over 30 years of service with the city, over a decade at the wastewater plant, and this is actually his last commission meeting. So, thank you, Dave. It's been great working with you. Your knowledge, your experience will be missed, as well as your personality. So it's been great speaking with you.
I don't know about that one, but I appreciate your
Yeah,
thoughts. And
yeah.
I've appreciated the opportunity to work for the city. I've got a lot of good experiences there. And it's kind of weird, 30 years ago, I was talking to Joe and John, and they're the guys that hired me, and here we are sitting on the same table 30 years later. I don't know if those guys are retired yet, but I hope I'm as productive in my retirement years as they are in their elder years, and we'll see what I can do about that.
As I said, his personality, so. No. Thanks, Dave.
It looks like we have somebody that needs to retort.
Well, obviously, your judgment relative to age is flawed, but I think that there's also an important contribution that Dave has made to this community and others, and that's the role that he played at Holtz-Krause landfill, now the East Bay Sports Complex. And he was invaluable to the community and others, in addition to his service to the utility. And I think that bears mentioning. Job well done in both capacities.
Thank you.
And I guess next I'd like to introduce his replacement, the new wastewater superintendent, Ben Brooks. He comes to us from Medford Wastewater, so just welcome, Ben. Ben, if you just wanted to say a few words about your background and what you bring to the table, definitely was a great hire for us. So.
Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate the opportunity to work for the city of Wausau. Bring my couple decades of experience along with me from the city of Medford and other places as well. So I look forward to working with the team in Wausau and making everything optimized there and
Sure.
produce a very clean effluent discharge into the Wisconsin River. So.
Thanks, Ben. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
First of all, good luck with retirement, Dave. But in regard to Ben, you make the front page quite a bit at the Star News. Maybe they were paving the way to keep you in Medford. So,
You never know.
but welcome to Wausau.
Thank you, Joe Jean.
Would you like to continue, or is there anything else you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I guess if any of the commissioners have any questions on ongoing projects or other items on the director's report?
Mr. Robinson.
Relative to the locates, how many of those are associated with the broadband expansion, the cable, laying fiber? Do you know?
I don't know, have exact numbers as far as how many are directly tied to the fiber, but looking back, 2019, we had just over 6,100. 2018, we had 4,600, and 2017, we had 4,000. So we're doing approximately over double. I would say close to most of those double are either tied to the fiber or other fiber projects. It seems that boring is becoming more prevalent instead of open cutting and other items. So drilling and boring has become a preferred installation method for most.
But
fibers.
is there a difference in terms of the locates and whether they bore or they dig?
Not typically, except the digging is usually slower, so they don't make as much progress on a daily or weekly basis.
So are we finding that with some of that cable work that they're asking a couple times for the same project?
We are,
Right.
especially now when it comes into the late season. So we had a lot of locates that were due last week Friday. Most of those showed up as relocates on Monday again as well.
So
with the snow.
what's the length of the locate is good for how many, what period of time?
Typically 10 days unless weather disturbs those marks.
So do we have a process of recovering our costs associated with those locates on the second locate for the same project?
No process in locating the costs and nothing available under statute or under state statute.
Are we barred from doing it or just not specifically empowered?
We're required by law to locate those for our utilities for the contractors as part of being the owner of those utilities.
Is it worthwhile for us to consider requesting a change to the statutes where if they don't advance a project under the first locate, that we could charge those utilities or companies for the second or third or subsequent locate?
I would think it might be worthwhile, but I think a lot of companies, a lot of utilities companies are running the same issues we are. There's just a lot of work going on and not many people to cover it.
Maybe that's something we could also talk to the league about.
Would you define locate, Scott, that word?
Digger's hotline ticket, or would be like an 811 digger's request?
Okay, a dig, in other words.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Jean?
With regard to the locates, but I would think a majority of that, I think that was probably TDS, right?
Correct.
The extra. Are they pretty well done with the community as far as installation?
Most of the main line is in. Now they're going to be doing drops. So anybody that subscribes to their service now is going to need to be dug in from the main line into the home.
Okay. I have some other questions.
Yep, go ahead.
I see in the, I think it was in the extra report, under the director's report, Class A sludge outfall. Can you define what that means? Outfall, I think of as water running into the river.
Outfall may not have been a good term.
Oh,
But so with the old wastewater plant, we produce Class B sludge, and we have an area where we load the sludge trucks with that sludge after it gets dewatered or thickened. And with the new plant, we'll have an option where it's set up with the dryer, it'll be a Class A sludge, which has fewer restrictions when it comes to spreading. But we'll also have the option of producing a Class B sludge. And so those are two different points where we'd load the truck from, depending on which of those products it was.
okay, so that, I felt that's what it meant, but you're right, the word outfall seemed weird in relation
It
to
might
a
be the
solid
way it
product.
is in the permit, though, because they
Okay.
usually look at what leaves the plant and would consider that maybe an outfall. I'm not sure. So,
I have a couple other questions or comments, but the pH drop in the aeration, was that because it was over aerated? The dissolved oxygen was high? I can't remember my chemistry well enough to.
It's part of the problem, but it has to do with the nitrification, denitrification process. And so when we convert that ammonia, then when it gets nitrified, we'll refer that one to Ben. Anyway, it does affect the pH. And so we are having issues with it being over aerated with the process and the ammonia and converting that. And then also as the project, and hopefully within the next week or so, we'll have a chemical we can add to increase the alkalinity and to control that pH. And so that will get corrected a couple different ways.
Yep.
Corrosion control study, I think I put a question mark by it, but I think after reading the information provided, but I don't think it's on the agenda today either, but that's because we're changing the characteristic of the water at the new facility, and that's why we have to do the study?
EPA will be requiring it with the lead and copper rule, as well as changing characteristics of the water. It's going to be a 2-for-1, so to speak.
I had a couple other questions, but Eric and I talked about the siphon on Washington Street, and I better understand that, and the lift station work potential.
Potentially, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Forst.
I had a question for Eric. It looks like in the running costs for the wastewater plant, I'm not sure how I read that, but are we running $1 million under budget on that, or is that something that's just,
Yeah, correct. So from the original bid, yeah,
Okay.
we're about $1 million under.
is there a reason for that?
When the bids came in, we did what they called the value engineering.
Yes.
And so with that first change order, we gained, we reduced that bid cost, and we're still under
Okay.
that original bid cost.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think we've covered it. We're now on to item number 3, discussion on the public information meeting results for the proposed solar project and possible action moving forward with the design of a solar array and landscaping plan for the new drinking water treatment facility at 1010 Bugbee Avenue.
So I tried to highlight, some of the steps moving forward that still need to be done. There's 5 that are outlined there, as well as any discussion on public information comments and the public information meetings that we've had too with the commissioners.
So, Mr. Robinson.
I guess I'm in a position where I'm not prepared to move forward at this time for a variety of reasons. One is that the Build Back Better proposal, the $1.75 trillion proposal that the House passed and is awaiting Senate action, contained $320 billion for solar and residential clean energy projects. Included in that was a 30% credit, refundable credit to entities owning those solar arrays, which would include potentially this commission. I think that that's material to our discussion, and until we know what's going on there, I think it would be premature for us to act given the potential for funding. The second one is that the commission has yet to decide on the size of the facility. We've looked at 3 different proposals, a smaller, medium, and a larger scale. The neighbors at the meetings have expressed concerns relative to the location of them. They've asked that we reconsider and review the geotechnical information that limited placement to the north, and I haven't seen that proposal. And I had an opportunity to discuss with some of with the WPS officials that were at the meeting, and they just in our discussions, they came up with a suggestion that maybe we wait and see what our actual demand is, peak demand, in the sizing of it, and get a year's worth of experience on that. It would be some time before the array was put in place, so we would have, we're hoping to have that operational in spring. We would have the advantage of, by delaying, knowing what Congress is going to do, knowing what our needs are and trying to work with the neighborhood to try to address some of their concerns and to evaluate whether or not geotechnical limitations can be overcome within that facility. So I guess I'm not in a position at this time to advance a specific proposal. I support solar. I think it's a very worthwhile goal in terms of carbon reduction and potential cost savings for us from an operational perspective. But I just don't know at this time that we have the information, understanding the financing. If we got a 30% credit, it makes a world of difference relative to the sizing and the payback and the others. And again, out of respect to the neighbors, we have not effectively engaged them in the discussion on the location, and they've raised some concerns that haven't been addressed yet. And I think that there are opportunities for us to evaluate the funding and the location and how do we become a good neighbor in that neighborhood.
Does anybody else have? Mr. Force and then Mr.
Yeah,
Jean.
I'm sorry, Jim Force. I hadn't heard John's concerns before. I think it might make sense to follow the course that he's described. I did express my concerns to a number of us here today about the conduct of the last public meeting, which I had to leave early because of another commitment, but I had heard enough to convince me that I agree with John on the point that we have not engaged that neighborhood in an effective way, and that there are a number of concerns that they've expressed that need to be addressed. If this were in my block, I would have the same comments, the same concerns, and would wish that the city would consider that. I think whether we proceed at this point or not, I think the concerns that the neighbors have raised are all concerns that make sense, and I think that could be addressed. There's, for example, on the landscaping front, there's a lot that could be done to make sure that that facility is not viewable from any of the homes in that area, and a lot of other things that I think could be part of that design. So I'm just on record as expressing concern that we take these neighborhood concerns into account whenever and whatever we do regarding solar. I agree with John. I think solar is the way to go, and I would really like to see this city build a solar facility and begin a path toward renewable energy and to demonstrate to others that it can be done successfully. But we need to do it in the right way.
Mr. Jean.
I had mixed feelings about this, but after I read the comments by the neighbors, I wasn't able to attend the meeting. I wish I could have attended the meeting. That would have been helpful for myself. But I'd like to first hear from staff regarding their feelings about it before we maybe act on this. And I'd like to see, I'd hate to spend more money and then we can't get zoning. I don't know if we can advance zoning. Not that I'm trying to get it out of the, I'd like to get it out of the way, but I hate to invest money and then zoning goes down. Now we've wasted a lot of taxpayers or ratepayers' money. So I don't know if that's possible. So I would follow somebody's motion to put this on hold for the time being, or however you want to word that.
Did you want to hear from staff before you make the motion, or?
Yeah,
are you
yes,
making
I
the
would
motion?
like to.
Okay, all right. Mr. Lindman.
So I think, we approached this in a way that we were communicating with the neighborhood and the public before decisions were made, and it gets messy. And I know that the commission has expressed concerns about that, us not having a defined project, us not having, but I think we're in a good place. We understand where the neighborhood is coming from. We understand where the general public is coming from. And I do think that we've gotten good feedback. I do think that the only way that we're going to address their concerns is to move forward with some sort of design. for the facility and to start sizing that array. To kind of just put the project on hold for a year and a half, 2 years, waiting for the new plant to come online, I'm not convinced that, that's going to be in the utility's best interest, especially with infrastructure dollars available coming, the potential for ARPA dollars to fund the capital costs, to have a project that will be close to shovel-ready, to at least apply for funding, would be a benefit to the ratepayers citywide. So, and Joe is right. I mean, we have a lot of work to do. There's rezoning that has to happen. There's a conditional use that has to happen depending on that zoning. There's, if we can begin the process of the design of the landscaping plans of what that potential would look like, we can most certainly work with the neighborhood with that information and bring that forward, try to address their concerns as we move forward. I guess from the staff perspective, we would like to continue on the approach, even if we don't have a final decision at this point. So,
Mr. Robinson?
The problem is that what are we designing? And the project's driven by multiple factors, including the cost benefit. And that cost benefit, if we know, we have a bill that has passed one house of Congress. We know that there are some obstacles in the Senate, but if that
Absolutely.
were to pass, a 30% credit that would allow us to work, potentially look at it would be a game changer in terms of the cash flow and the return on investment. I don't see a delay in this case to be significant, but I also think that we need to know where we're putting that. There's a design, but the design is based on what? The current proposed location? Is it based upon reevaluation of the geotechnical criteria? I think we're a ways away from that, and I understand the need and the desire to move it along, but this commission has not taken a stand on it yet. We need additional information before we can advance that to a decision stage. And I think we need to lay out, if we need rezoning, if we need a conditional use, if we need approval from the Village of Maine, or, what are the steps that we need to do? And we're not there yet. We can't answer, at the last informational meeting, what were the setbacks? Where will this be? We couldn't answer some of those things, and I understand that's part of design, but it's still at a concept stage. But again, that's looking at that existing footprint and that additional parcel. And to the neighbors, we may locate it somewhere else, and then the utility may sell off that parcel, and a developer may come in, and those trees would be subject to the whims of that developer. So there are a number of factors that come into play, but I don't feel comfortable as a commissioner entrusted to do due diligence and be prudent with the ratepayers' dollars to make a decision at this time. I'd like to go back and look at the geotechnical information. I know that there was solid waste in the context of purest definition of solid waste placed on that parcel. But are there opportunities to do footings or some other things that may stabilize that material to such an extent that we could look at it as a potential alternative or supplemental location to the array that could address some of the neighborhood concerns? And you can't do that at a design stage if you're only looking at a limited parcel. I think we as a commission need to have that expanded information. And I appreciate the efforts that Eric, you and your staff have made, but I don't feel comfortable at this time advancing a proposal to design without that additional information.
So would you be willing to approve us to work to gain additional geotechnical work on the north side and some other options? Because that currently isn't in a scope, but we could adjust the scope of what we're working with Clark Deets to move that forward to see, to better understand and provide you that information.
I would certainly, if you're directing that question to me, I would certainly entertain that concept.
Okay.
You know, we'd want to get a proposal. It's not an open-ended approval, but it's in concept. I think that's what we heard at the last informational meeting from the public and the neighborhood. I'm seeing some nods that they're looking for us. I think that without that, we're going to run into significant neighborhood objections, and if we can accommodate it, and maybe it's a two-phase solar array, one with the buffers in the neighborhood and one with a second set on the north end, but it would be, I don't know that we ever looked at it from that perspective. I don't have a problem with advancing additional discussions and evaluation and requesting a request for proposals for additional geotechnical work. And if that's what you're looking for, I would be happy to offer that as a motion directionally if it gives us the directional information, but I think we want to know what those costs are too.
Well, I think that we would have those costs from what we've done initially, through Clark Deets and their contract. Obviously, we haven't nearly expended that contract because we haven't got into design, but we could work with them on an adjustment of a scope within that and stay within that budget. We can move that forward if the commission is okay with
I
that.
think that moves us in the right direction. Excuse me for sounding off now too, but I'm also interested in engaging maybe some of the neighborhood folks in, I don't know what to call it, if it's a steering committee or something, but maybe a beautification or some type of environmental just kind of guidance, so that we could work with some of you folks to make sure that we're doing good by what we said we were going to do, make sure that we're doing the right thing. So that's also, I don't know if that's bundled into the same motion, but that's another part of this that I would also want to do. Mr. Robinson and Mr. Force.
For the purposes of discussion, I would move that we continue work on the development of the solar array through the evaluation and obtaining of additional geotechnical information relative to the suitability of other portions of the site to host the solar array. And that we create a work group to engage the neighborhood relative to the design and the location of those facilities, and that we reevaluate the pro forma in light of the potential American Rescue Act plan and potential Build Back Better legislation and how that might impact the project.
Okay.
So it's a three-phase
Right.
approach.
The trifecta of a motion. Would I have a second before we begin? I have a second by Herbst. All right, Mr. Force.
Yeah, I would echo John's comments here. I would like to see us further define this quote-unquote work group, because I think one of our failings to date is that we didn't involve neighborhood input until after plans were drawn up, so that all we got was a reaction. I would hope going forward we would have some involvement. I'm not sure how that would take place, whether it's that neighborhood group or whether it's a group of folks who want to step forward and be part of the planning. So that's one point. And to John's point about looking again at the subsurface content of that northern property, I would also like to see part of the planning, the berm and the landscaping that was mentioned in one of the letters to the commission from neighbors on Tierney Street. I'd like to see that costed out and part of a design, if a design is prepared, as one of the options going forward. So what I'm saying is if one of the options is to put part of the solar array to the north based on soil testing, and then another part of the proposal is to continue with the arrays on the site to the south of that design include the berm and the landscaping that's been recommended by the neighbors who live to the east of that parcel.
Mr. Jean.
If we move it to the north, we move into another political jurisdiction, and do we anticipate any issues with zoning there?
Yeah, we'll have to go to the village board and request, I believe it's a conditional use based on the current zoning. And yeah, so that would be the process we'd have to go through.
We
So-
have in the recent past had discussions that were productive with the village.
Good.
Not about this, but about other things. Okay, so what we are voting on right now is a motion to get additional geotechnical information on that stuff to the north, possible, to create a work group with the neighborhood. If you would approve me maybe writing up some criteria and positing it for the next meeting, I would do that. That sounds good. And then we would also like to reevaluate the pro forma based on potential savings or credits from the Build Back Better plan
And the American.
and
Rescue-
ARPA.
And ARPA.
Okay.
And include landscaping?
I included that in the work group, if that's okay?
That's
Okay.
fine.
I didn't say it out loud, just
That's all right,
as
just as long as it
note
doesn't
to
get
myself.
lost, Mayor.
Okay. Does anybody need anything more? We're good? All right, all of those in favor of the motion that I just described can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. That is moving forward slowly. I don't know if folks want to stick around for the rest of the meeting. You're more than welcome. Otherwise, I'll give you a moment to maybe readjust yourselves. All right,
Peter?
thank you. Yep.
Okay.
All right, so the next item on our agenda is item number 4. It is discussion and possible action on a sole source request to purchase pipe and fittings immediately for 2022 projects due to the material delivery delays and possible material price increases. This is a very 2022 thing to talk about. Mr. Lindman.
Yes, yeah. We've been working with our local suppliers for pipe materials, and they're saying that they are 6 to 7 months out right now. We won't be bidding our street projects till February, opening bids in March, which means that pipe wouldn't be ordered until, best case scenario, probably mid to late March, which could potentially put us near the end of the construction season. The idea would be that we would work with our typical suppliers and purchase put that pipe material on order, working with the engineering side here at City Hall, getting those quantities put together so that we could get that on order currently and secured. And it is budgeted already for the '22 budget. We just would secure that purchase through a PO and then pay for it once it's supplied.
Mr. Robinson.
So is this the same process we would use in February? Or is this a different?
No. Usually what we would do would we bid it and the contractor would order the materials. Yeah. Yeah. So we would have to adjust our specifications and payment methods in our specifications as far as that it would be owner purchased materials.
So does the owner purchase net us a better price?
I don't, I couldn't tell you one way or another if it would or it wouldn't. It's more work on the administrative side for us. We have to track and we have to make sure there's not waste, and we have to make sure we have the fittings they need, because nothing is perfect in the field. And so that ends up on our inspector responsibilities, so, which we're willing to take on to make sure our projects get done on time in '22.
But, in that case, we're bearing the risk versus,
Correct.
for.
Yep. But we would also bear a risk of not completing projects. I think that's a much higher risk than taking on the risk of ordering pipe and materials.
And,
Yeah.
and consistent with procurement policies, are there any concerns relative
We do.
to sole sourcing on an accelerated basis, the purchase, acquisition of material that?
No, we did this with vehicles and stuff too, for our fleet.
Do you have Mary Ann on the WebEx if you want to hear from her? Not sure. She's probably also getting other work done.
My understanding is you still were going to competitively procure them. You were just going to do that sooner versus later, right, Eric?
Yeah, we were just gonna use core main actually, because that's who we've been buying all of our materials through.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I guess I didn't understand that.
yeah.
So let me direct the question to Mary Ann, then. Is this consistent with past practice and procurement policies?
So I guess our procurement policy does allow us to sole source purchases under a variety of categories. You know, emergency purchases, to standardize equipment, things like that, if it's a phased project. So I think it would really be up to the commission's, you know, responsibility to decide if you felt that the timing was of such a situation that it limited our ability to procure them competitively. The other thing that, you know, we could do is not do as robust of a competitive and, you know, get some quotes quickly. I don't know, you know, I'm not intimately familiar at this moment with what Water and Sewer has done past years, like how long they've kept the RFP or bid process open. You know, you could do some more aggressive timetables so that you could move the purchase along. But our policy does give us the latitude to sole source if we feel like our, you know, if we're justified. You know, and another thing, if we procured them competitively last year and we look at what the price change is, that might be another justification for sole sourcing if we felt like there wasn't a drastic change in price.
Okay, Mr. Jean?
Who would be other vendors? I don't recall.
I think Ferguson's the only other one that would supply this area. So really,
There's
we
only-
can't purchase directly from the manufacturers like Tyler Pipe and things. We have to go through suppliers. And so there's only a couple that serve this area. And then if we do bid them, then we're probably another month out before actually getting those bids back and getting them put in. So we're just kind of delaying. I mean, with the holidays and stuff coming up, it's going to be hard.
We wouldn't have to bid that. You could get proposals for this.
If that's what the commission wanted, yeah. Engineering felt they could have the quantities put together this week. We'd probably have at least another week trying to get quotes from Ferguson and Core Main. But then we'd also ask them too for delivery times and if they could guarantee them, which I doubt they'll guarantee them. I don't think anybody's guaranteeing anything these days, but we could ask.
I think what Ms. Grote was saying is we probably should do that if we have the time. But I understand the value of getting the pipe ordered, so
Right,
I think that's paramount to this process.
right. So, I mean, if you're looking for a staff recommendation, I would recommend with the sole sources written and moving forward with Core Main to get them on order under a PO as quickly as we can, get those quantities put together.
What's the total amount of the purchase?
We're estimating right now, Mary Ann, about $200,000 in materials.
All right. So do we have a motion by anybody? See a couple people looking at each other.
I'll make a motion. I'll move to accept the sole source, but I still would, fittings might come under a different category than just pipe. And pipe is going to be the most expensive portion of it. So if you can still get quotes, I'd appreciate that as a part of the process.
Is that what you'd prefer?
Yes,
Us to
yes.
reach out and get quotes from both suppliers?
Yeah, and
Okay.
if fittings don't if they can't provide that number for fittings, I'm okay with that you go with core main. But
Okay,
I
so
think the pipe, you should be able to get a number real quick.
Okay, so the motion is to get some quotes on the pipe and then get the fittings along with it, but maybe not necessarily as important as the quote for the pipe.
We can do that.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Robinson?
Could I direct your question to Joe? Would you just be open to get quotes, and if you don't get the fittings quote, you don't have a fittings quote, you go with whoever is left?
The pipe.
I would just be given the volume, $200,000, I'd like to try to get quotes.
We can do that. Can do that, Joe.
Okay, so the motion is to get quotes on the pipe, but move ahead.
And fittings, pipes and fittings.
Okay, sorry. Quotes on the pipes and fittings.
I would second the motion.
All right, we have a second by Robinson. Any other discussion here? Okay, all of those in favor of moving ahead to get pipes and fittings ASAP for 2022 projects can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, we are on item number 5. This is discussion and possible action on water utility vendor agreement contract with the Department of Administration for Low-Income Household Water Assistant Program. There you go with LIHWAP.
Right. This is a home energy program through the DOA, and they help low-income people in the rears on their water bills, and so they would pay the utility directly. Valerie, do I have that correct? Yeah. And so then with our reporting system, then we have to track those dollars separately. Typically what happens if we have an individual who is in the rears with their utility bill, at the end of the year, that goes on to the tax bill, and then the county pays it. This is another avenue for people who are struggling to reach out and get some assistance with their utility bills and get the rears paid off, and that money does come directly to us, so.
Mr. Force.
A question and then a follow-up. You know, back when we started talking about the Water Savvy program, one of the reasons that we did that was to try to help low-income customers save money on their water. We looked into this and there wasn't anything. Is this a new program?
I don't know that it's new. It is new. Okay, so this is a new program. It just came to me this year, this fall, so
All right.
we're implementing that, so.
Then the second question is, how much paperwork, back-end business activity would this cause the city to have to accomplish?
I think I'd have to rely on Valerie to answer that, but there is some administrative
Is it a big
costs.
clerical load that we would have to take on?
Wait for Valerie to approach the microphone.
Thanks, Val.
Valerie Swanborg, Finance Department. This is a new program. The state program is Wisconsin Energy Assistance, WEA, and this program is secondary to that program. It came into existence because there was some surplus funding that has been directed for this purpose. We don't know if the program is going to continue longer than 1 year, and we had to submit to be a qualified vendor in order to receive the payments directly from this program. My understanding is that low-income households that apply for assistance have to first go through WEA. And then if there is still leftover need, then this program will pay any arrearages on their account directly to us. That's why we had to become a vendor. And reading through the contract we had to sign, it is allowing the state of Wisconsin to direct reporting under the contract and any other reporting that they decide later that they want. So it's wide open. As far as what they specified for reporting up front, we have to track the payments separately by their source and then be able to give them a report later. These are the accounts, the money got applied. because that's not too terribly burdensome in itself once we establish the business process to track the payments, because the payment is for arrearages, so we should be getting one payment per account.
And are these accounts identified because they're in arrears?
They are identified because the household applied to the state.
I see. So they have to initiate that?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Jean.
Does that apply to renters and homeowners? Does this program?
I'll have to clarify that for you, Joe, but I think it's just the homeowners right now, because there's separate programs for rent assistance.
Any other questions or comments, or is there a motion? I have a motion by Robinson, I'm guessing to sign on to the vendor agreement contract with the DOA for low-income household water assistant program.
Is it, is it to enter into or create the program? Because you already signed the contract?
Yeah, we submitted the contract, yeah. So it would be to really, for the commission to approve us, moving forward.
I would move to approve the creation of a low-income household water assistance program.
All right, we have a motion to create, second by Jean. Any other comments? Okay, all of those in favor of creating a low-income household water assistant program in Wausau can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, next up, we are on item number 6, discussion and possible action on the recommendation to purchase a tool cat type utility vehicle.
Scott,
Okay.
We put this out for RFP. Quotes were opened at Board of Public Works. We had one vendor. That is the price. We had $90,000 budgeted for this item.
Mr. Robinson.
Again, why is this here?
Past practice.
Why is this here?
part of our procurement policy requires that, we have a entity approve large purchases like this.
So the
That's-
board, if we budgeted, again, I'm going to go back to operations versus policy, and we are a policy board. If we've approved $90,000 in the budget, the bid came in with the extended warranty at 87, 181, why do we need to approve it? We set the parameters in the budget. I'm just looking for ways to expedite and get us out of those operational decisions. So I'm going to raise this every time it comes in until we either change the policy, because our job is to set the policy and the parameters. We don't need to second guess your opening bids and complying with our policies. If the Board of Public Works has been moved with it, do we need to act on it?
The board didn't take action on it. We just have to open them at the board and then the entity. So I guess if the commission doesn't want to see these here, we can have the board approve them too. But we just always thought that the commission was appreciative of understanding what is being purchased and with ratepayer funding, so.
Mr. Jean.
What would it take to change the sole source purchase arrangement? Is that something that's go back to council?
No, we can, the Board of Public Works can
Yeah, I know
approve
they
the
can,
purchase.
yeah.
And so it just, we've always elected to bring it here so the commission's aware, but if.
I guess I would just add too that I think there's maybe some wish, because we've come across this in other meetings, where maybe the attorney would appreciate us voting on approving spending the money, even if we've budgeted for it. So I think that's something that we can take back to both attorney and other staff to inquire about, that maybe we can streamline this. Yeah, Mr. Jean? Or are you just agreeing?
No, couldn't this just be part of the director's report so that we could see it, we would be informed of it? And if we had any questions, we would bring them up at that point.
The question is legislatively, do we need to vote on it? And my understanding from our attorney in the past has been, yes, that we should vote on it. However, we can look into this and maybe come up with a better process, including possibly putting it in a report.
Well, meantime, then I would move to approve this.
Okay, we have a motion to approve in a second by Jean. Any further discussion other than we would like to improve the process? Okay, all of those in favor of recommending the purchase of a toolcat type utility vehicle can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next up, we have discussion and possible action on the recommendations for the purchase of hydrated lime sodium silicate and sodium hypochlorite for 2022.
I move to approve the recommended purchase.
Okay, there is one caveat, Jim.
right, sorry.
Sodium hypochlorite, a typical practice would have been take the low bidder or past supplier, which isn't an issue with the hydrated lime or the sodium silicate. The sodium hypochlorite, however, because of the market fluctuations for the last year and a half, prices have doubled since last year. So the vendors took it upon themselves to supply quarterly pricing, which is less expensive per gallon, but is subject to quarterly changes. The annual pricing is a little more expensive, but locked in for a year. I guess,
Okay.
what would the commission's appetite be for the risk?
What is your recommendation?
I would recommend to go with annual pricing. It's doubled in the last year. I don't think we want to go at one quarter into the season and then have another double.
I would move that that's what we do.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the purchase, particularly noting that the sodium hypochlorite for 2022 will be locked in for the entire year. Any discussion on this? Not seeing any. All of those in favor of purchasing those chemicals can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Item number 8, discussion and possible action on the recommendation for the purchase of a forklift. See quote summaries attached. Staff recommends the Octane forklift. Would you like to brief us?
Again, staff recommends Octane. $40,000 was budgeted for this item.
I move to approve.
Got a motion by Force, second by Herbst.
And
Mr.
ditto to my
Robinson.
earlier comments.
Okay, so we want to make sure that we're using an economy of time and intellect. Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, all of those in favor of purchasing the Octane forklift can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next up, discussion and clarification for private side lead service line replacement funding. Who would like to take this?
You wanna?
I
go
can.
ahead, Scott.
We have been getting some requests for funding when residents are replacing sewer laterals. And they end up having lead lines. Sometimes they don't know it until after they're into the project. Sometimes it doesn't become apparent until after they're dug down to it. We just wanted to clarify that we would be able to use this funding or get permission from this commission to use the funding for those projects.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Jean.
I'll move to accept the staff's recommendation regarding that.
All right, we have a motion from Jean to accept the staff recommendation and a second by, it looks like Robinson. Any more discussion? Mr. Jean, can you turn your mic on?
This would be for paying only for the lead service, not the sewer.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, so all of those in favor of moving forward with the private side lead service line replacement funding, inclusive of folks who are doing their own replacement, can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, item number 10, discussion and possible action on a resolution designated the Director of Public Works and Utilities or Water and Superintendent to apply for private lead service line replacement funding.
So as the last couple of years, we need a resolution passed by city council for applying for the forgivable loan for lead service line replacement funding. So this really mirrors the one that you approved the previous year in 2020, so.
Mr. Robinson has moved to approve, second by Herbst. Any discussion or questions? Okay, all of those in favor of designating the Director of Public Works and Utilities or Water Superintendent to apply for private lead service line replacement funding, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Item number 11, discussion and possible action on the proposals to purchase the existing wastewater standby generator.
We had a couple of parties that was interested in purchasing our existing equipment. It's going to be replaced with 2 newer generators, but neither one came through with a written quote, and so it's a moot point, I guess.
Okay, so we got nothing here.
We got nothing.
We can just go ahead and move right on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right, item 12, discussion and possible action on an amendment to the Clark Deets Services Agreement to complete design and bid services for the sanitary sewer interceptor at 48th Avenue. Who wants to take that?
Yeah, so I wrote up a memo trying to explain. So initially, Clark Deets was under contract with us at the 72nd Avenue lift station along with some additional sewer improvement work. We put that on hold because we received some SDP urban funds through the MPO for reconstruction of Stewart Avenue in 2024. There's a portion of the sewer work that we're proposing to do and improvements near 48th Avenue that are not within that project area with the DOT. We'd like to get that work done ahead of time. So we'd like to pursue that work under this agreement with Clark Deets to get that designed and bid out for 2022, so it's ready for the project in '24.
Mr. Robinson?
A question relative to approach, and you've got a lump sum for all the activities except for 3D of 27.9, but yet on 3D, which is the coordination with the railroads, it's a time and materials of 12,000. Understanding the difficulty in working with railroads and access, I understand that, but why are we a lump sum on the balance and not a time and materials not to exceed?
So, ask that question again, John?
What, you've got a lump sum of 27.9
Yep.
versus a not to exceed 12,000 on a time and material. Why are we a lump sum on one and not a time and materials not to exceed on the 27.9, the non-3D activities? Is that just our normal policy, practice?
No, usually what we like is to have a lump sum, kind of not to exceed, but I think with the railroad issues, sometimes we're not always sure exactly. I think they're doing their best to estimate what their costs would be, working with the railroad and getting those permits and those permissions. Is that what your question is?
Well, I understand the railroads because
Okay,
in my previous life with the DNR, they were the most difficult people to work
Yeah.
with. And fortunately, we could name them responsible parties on environmental cleanups, which usually got their attention and made it easier, but you can't do that as a city. But the question gets at the design of the contract, not the amount, but the design in the context of a lump sum versus a time and material not to exceed. Is that, where does that fit within the current? Because most of the times when, in a previous life, I did work for a engineering firm and did their proposal development, and we usually did a not to exceed on a time and material basis.
Sure. I guess we've done both here. There's not an issue from a procurement standpoint with us approving a time and materials. I guess if it's a time and materials you want not to exceed 12,000 with additional approvals, that's fine too.
That would be the 27.9,
The 27.9 for the lump sum.
right.
Yeah. The lump sum has been fairly typical with engineering services and stuff that we've had, but we do ask them, like they have here, to break those down. to try to understand which portions and phases of the work that we're paying for. It makes it easier for me to approve payments, as we work through on a monthly basis to know what's delivered, what they're requesting. Are they requesting for the preliminary design, final design, permitting, things like that. So those portions to break it out. Yeah. Is there something different you'd like to see?
Well,
now or
I'm
in the
asking
future?
relative to approach, and again, I'm more used to in the contracting like when I was with REI versus even with the state, when we contracted, it was rarely a lump sum, it was usually a time and material with the state contracting. So I'm just asking.
Yeah, I'm not.
The basis, perhaps the basis, the underlying principle that drives whether we are lump sum or not to exceed.
Well, personally, I like the lump sum. It's a lot easier for me to administer. I don't have to, track their time and materials and costs for specific individuals and stuff. They provide that. And I also have a firm budget number, and I know where I'm at
So
with.
we're looking at a $300,000 to $400,000 project?
I don't know. Do you know what the construction amount of that work would be, Tanya?
I don't think we took it out separate yet from the
Yeah.
student project.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think you're, that's what
I'm getting arms up in the air from public
So-
access. So if you want to use the
Clark,
microphone.
oh, okay. Come on. Thanks, Tanya.
started me today.
We like the
Tanya
blame.
Westfall with Clark Deets. We didn't pull that cost out of the full Stewart Avenue project yet. We'll do that once we move forward, putting this as a separate project. But I think you're probably close in the couple $100,000 range. It's probably fair.
Mr. Jean.
Since Tanya's at the podium, is it paramount that we replace it in '22?
It's not.
Okay.
However, in talking with staff, because the lead time on railroad approvals can be so great, we don't want it to hold up the Stewart Avenue project, and that project has a more strict timeline. So this sewer needs to be in before the sewer upstream of that on Stewart can be installed. So we're optimistic. We've done 2 recent projects with the railroad, some of it in this similar corridor. And we've developed somewhat of a relationship with them, so we're optimistic we can get it through this year, but you just never know. There are 2 railroad ownerships along there as well. CN and Union Pacific have jurisdiction over that stretch both.
Well, that's a 15-inch sewer. All the flow from the industrial park in that neighborhood all flows through that 15-inch now. It's going to be the same way when you redirect the flow down Stewart. That's like the bottom of the funnel,
Correct.
correct? But, so, and I don't
Diane
think...
might have, like, the long-term plan. Diane, do you want to?
Diane Toon from Clark Deets. All I was going to say, Joe, is that long-term, once the work on Stewart gets done, we'll also have the flow from the whole west side industrial park coming that way too. It's in there now, but what we're talking about is bringing all the flow from that 72nd Avenue station we did right along Stewart and into that 15-inch as well.
Well, I fully understand that.
Okay.
But the flow at the bottom of the funnel from 48th in the railroad corridor will still go through that 15-inch pipe, whether it's coming along the railroad or part of the Stewart.
Right.
So the only reason for bringing it up is that if by chance you run into difficulty, it is not totally necessary to be done before you do the Stewart Avenue project.
Not totally necessary, just in the long term.
In the long
Necessary,
term,
yeah.
yes, I'm okay with that. Because I don't think the flows that were projected materialized either. Because I think what was the name of the cheese factory that moved out there, I don't think they generated
Oh,
the flows
yeah,
that they were
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
So,
Right, and we're just maybe 5 years into the design period for when the lift station was sized. So it's good you're not there yet.
no, it's great. So if you get bumped with time and you don't get a bid in '22, I don't think it's the end of the world, okay? That's, unless something different has changed with flows, then any of us know, okay?
We're not aware of anything right now, Joe, so hopefully.
I'll take my pick
we're
and take
okay.
a look.
Yeah, okay, yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you're empowered to do that, but
Yeah.
any other questions, or do I have a motion?
I'll move.
All right, I have a motion to amend the Clark Deets Services Agreement to complete design and bid services for sanitary sewer Interceptor at 48th Avenue. I have a second by Mr. Force. Any further discussion here? Okay, all of those in favor of amending the Clark Deets Service Agreement can signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that's passed. Last item on our agenda is I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Herbst. I have a second by Robinson. All those in favor can signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.